4 diseases that changed world history. And this presentation was done in conjunction with my mentor and spiritual advisor, Dr. McCotter. Beautiful human being inside and out. And I'm fully aware we're in the Middle Ages, and I'm fully aware that the bubonic plague or the Black Death is the big pandemic during this time. But while learning about the bubonic plague, I wanted to work on our geography skills, and I wanted to do a little compare and contrast of some other diseases, bearing in mind there have been dozens of diseases that have changed the course of history. I chose 4. And the first I chose is smallpox. And smallpox was incredibly destructive. Incredibly. I say was because it's been eradicated. In fact, you can tell somebody who's old, they'll have a scar. Usually it's on their deltoid, their shoulder, tricep, that area. The old smallpox vaccine left a scar, and I do have one. I didn't take off my shirt in class because you'd feel too good about yourself, wouldn't be school appropriate, but I have that scar because I was born in 1974. The new vaccines don't cause that, but for those who are afflicted with it, you go from normal and healthy to holy cow sick very quickly. Of a normal healthy child, normal, maybe a couple bug bites. I wouldn't even notice it as a parent. By day 5, something's definitely wrong, and then days 6 through 14, holy cow, clearly destructive disease. And it was caused by spreading. And normally when I say intermixing, cultural diffusion, collective learning, it's usually in a positive construct that mixing with people is good, and it is, but there is a downside. When people mix, disease mixes. And the world used to be in 4 parts, just to reiterate an old point. The first world zone, the Americas. The second world zone, the Pacific Islands, which aren't shown very well in this map. The third world zone, Australasia, and the fourth world zone, Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, Asia. And this is the one that had the most mixing, the Silk Road, the Trans-Saharan trade networks. So these people were exposed to a lot more disease, and those who survived had an immune system that was a lot different than the other world zones, and that becomes a game changer in our story. Case in point, in the Americas, destruction on a scale that's really hard to wrap your mind around. If you look at this chart, in 1520 there were close to 22 million human beings living in the Americas. By 1550, 3 million. 19 million dead in the span of 30 years, and that's smallpox. Incredibly Bubonic Plague, the one that's synonymous with the Middle Ages, even though the Bubonic Plague was in existence before the Middle Ages, hugely destructive during this time. And this is a bubo. And next slide is very graphic. I apologize for those who are squeamish. But when you do pass away from it, you can see the blackened area caused by the bubonic plague and another bubo. And it was so destructive. And, people during the time didn't have the scientific know-how to have a scientific explanation. They didn't know. In fact, some of it boiled down into some lunacy. Some people were blaming Jewish people for poisoning the wells. That's not true. That's insane. But when you have no basis in science, you're going to come up with superstitious mumbo jumbo. And it's from animals, fleas and rats. That's a flea. Fleas and rats. And the fleas and the rats took out 1/3 of Europe in 6 years. 1347, 1353, Europe got hit hard, and it's fairly simple. A rat has the bacteria with the plague. A flea will jump upon the rat, drink the rat's blood. The bacteria multiplies. Flea jumps off the rat onto a person, bites the person, and that's it. That's done. 1/3 of Europe died that way in 6 years, and it spread very, very rapidly. Now, malaria is also caused by an insect, the mosquito. And the mosquito will be infected and bite the person, and it keeps spreading. And malaria has been around, we have first evidence is 8,000 BC. So over 10,000 years we've had malaria. It's too cold to get it here, and you'll be noticing that it does hit the tropical areas. Now, different than smallpox and the bubonic plague. Smallpox is gone. Malaria is not gone. The bubonic plague is very much in control, but there's only, a few cases worldwide. Malaria is a very pressing, very now issue to eradicate. And I got this from the source of the group that's trying to get funding for malaria, and I just want to say this. Now, the statistics I got from more reputable sources, the World Health Organization, neutral sources, said that malaria kills, I've heard I read, 1,200 to 1,500 people a day. Now, the group that's trying to get money for malaria says 3,000. Now, I'm not saying it's only 1,200 children a day. That's a problem. I get it's a problem, but again, quick historiography moment of where you're getting your source. Okay, malaria is still very prevalent in the world, unfortunately, and from the sources I saw, thousands of people die every day from malaria. Cholera, the fourth disease, is the newest disease. First recorded instance was 1817, compared to smallpox, which is 12,000 years old, if not older, and malaria, that's 10,000 years old. Cholera is fairly new. And it's caused by filth. It's caused by filth. And when human beings became industrial and human beings started congregating in cities that didn't have the sanitation and didn't have the adequate access to clean water, it gets really, really foul. Still a problem. I mean, to think about this water, God knows what's in this water. It's probably nothing you want to fiddle with. It ultimately ends with this, and it's really one of these things which is pretty gross, but when you get cholera, it winds up in the human waste. Human waste gets into the water. People get a hold of that water with the human waste in it. It's not cleaned adequately. They ingest it or bathe in it or what have you, and then it gets into them, and the cycle continues. It's not a way. And I mean, dying from dehydration caused by diarrhea, I don't think anybody wants to check out that way. It's about as bad as it can go. All right, so that's the PowerPoint. And then I had you, I'm going to get to the class page, do an assignment, disease in the geohistogram assignment. So this is Unit 2, by the way. Where are you, Unit 2? Unit 2. And the 49th and 50th day says the disease and geohistogram assignment. I'm going to click on that, and it's coming up. All right. And again, I know if you have a Chromebook, it will be a Google Doc, and that's okay. So what I just want to show you is how to do it. Now, this is a traditional world map, and obviously when it's printed off, it won't look this way, but you can see it in a different direction. And this is a geohistogram minus the empires. So what we're going to do is we are going to chart 4 diseases, the ones we just mentioned, smallpox, malaria, bubonic plague, cholera, and you're going to put it on the map. So I'll give you a quick example on both. Smallpox outbreaks in Nile River Valley in Mesopotamia. So this is modern Egypt, modern Iraq. So if I go back to my world map, I will chart it. Here's Egypt, here's Iraq, and you'll chart it there. Now, on the geohistogram, 10,000 BC is below the line here. It's all the way here. Egypt is in East Africa, Middle East, so I'll put something here. Now, going back to the instructions, I'm asking you to be a geographer. And geographers use symbols, they use colors, they use arrows. You know, there's a couple ways you can do it. I'd like you to be creative, and you're going to designate a color for every disease. For instance, red smallpox, yellow malaria, green bubonic plague, blue cholera, and you're going to chart that. Now, you're going to use your atlas, and you're going to express this and however you want to, with arrows, with symbols, with making a key. So it's a geography drill, okay? Both on the traditional map and the geohistogram. So hopefully you can do that. Now, I think the part you might struggle with, here's the timeline. Smallpox, malaria, bubonic plague, cholera are the final questions, okay? So here are the final questions. And in the end, I'm going to ask you, choose one of the diseases mapped or charted, recreate the geohistogram as if air travel had been introduced in 1000 CE. Now, what changes would happen? Now, this is a thinking drill. Now, looking at the colors on your geohistogram, take one of them and recreate what would have happened. So this is, you can't, be certain of this. This is a thinking drill. I'm not going to hold you to 100% accuracy, because we don't know. It's a hypothetical. But show me, with air travel, with more mixing, what would happen? How would the world be different? So just show me that you can think there. Now, number 2, How did the patterns of disease change after time was introduced as a factor? So number 2 is, what patterns do you see? And again, in learning history, it doesn't have to be words. It doesn't have to be lecture, data, numbers, maps. These are other ways you can do this. So if you look at the patterns, so for example, what I'm going to have you look at is a lot of these diseases lie dormant. Nothing happens. Almost like a volcano, dormant, then it explodes. Boom. And it hits people. Then it goes dormant. Then it hits people. So what patterns do you see? I'm looking for logic. What patterns exist in these diseases? Now, cholera is very different. Cholera is wherever, people are impoverished in big cities and there's inadequate sanitation, it's going to break out. Other ones, especially the old ones, smallpox and malaria, you can see definite patterns to what happens there. So again, use data to see if you can extrapolate a story. More mathematical than historical, but again, using that, that analytical part of your brain, I hope. Number 3, what historical events might explain the differences and diffusions of the diseases? Now, I know we're not crazy long into the class, but there are some things that have happened that you can explain caused these things to happen. For example, the Silk Road. Tons of examples into the Silk Road. The 4 world zones. When the world zones connected in 1492. What happened there? Some other events that might happen that you've already heard about. What about all these barbarian groups hitting the Roman Empire, especially the Huns, way out in Asia, showing up here? The rise of naval travel, the rise of boats, ports, big important ports, the Mediterranean Sea, all the mixing. How about the Vikings? So think about what you already know, and how does that explain the diffusion of disease? And I gave you some pretty good clues there, so think about those. Number 4, what technological innovations might explain the differences in the diffusion of the diseases? Now, obviously, better travel ways are going to cause people to mix more. People mix more, disease goes up. So the rise of boats, the rise of the Silk Road. Now, if you go into time, especially with cholera, now, where the way we live, we don't live in filth. All of our water goes away and it gets processed by a water treatment plant. Detroit water is some of the cleanest in the country. It's a fantastic perk of living here. Some people don't. If you go to Bangladesh, their water is not our water. I've traveled to some places and they say, don't drink the water. Locally, Flint, okay? Now, Flint didn't have adequate, facilities to treat their water, and it was a horror show. So think about that. How does technology affect disease? How about the airplane? I mean, with the airplane that people can travel freely and quickly, that's a game changer. Number 5, what else might explain the differences in diffusion and occurrences in particular diseases? What else, could have caused this? What else may have done this? I'm having you use your brain to think about what else, could happen to cause a disease to happen, and break them down, because these 4 diseases are different. So, for example, malaria with quinine. Quinine is a means of not getting malaria. Why do some people have quinine, other people don't? Why is malaria affecting the more impoverished parts of the world, not the more affluent? Stuff like that. And then number 6, how might these diseases have affected human populations based on their diffusion across area and time? An obvious one, what I just showed you, the smallpox in the Americas. That drastically changed the human population. The Bubonic Plague in Europe starting in 1347. These are some obvious ones. So again, this is part science, part history, part math. We're kind of using different skills here, but they're all valuable skills. So what I'm going to ask you to do over the next couple days is delve deep into these 4 diseases, do a little geography on the map and the geohistogram, answer those 6 questions, and we'll move on. So thank you for watching, and have a good day.